Welcome to Thursday Chapel, and welcome to a special chapel that we do every year. Today's chapel is our Missions and Service Chapel. And my prayer is that by the time you leave this building today, the Holy Spirit would have convicted you that if we are men and women of God as we claim to be, then we cannot have a relationship with God without having a call on our life to actually put feet to our faith and walk out the relationship that we have with God by being the hands and feet of Christ to every single person we meet on this campus and around the world. So today we're going to do a two-part. We're going to have a fantastic young man who is going to speak to you from his own personal experience of being in the mission field. And in just a few moments you will hear from Brandon and hear what God did through him and in him during his service year as a student missionary. Immediately following that, we're going to have a Q&A panel. So we invite you to send in questions. The number for texting will appear on the screen. We're going to have panelists who've gone on short-term mission trips. We're going to have panelists who've gone on this long-term student missionary service. So we would love for you to have the opportunity to ask direct questions from students who have walked in those shoes. So please send in text questions as we go throughout the program, and we look forward to partnering with you in putting feet to faith at Andrews University. Please welcome with me, Brandon.
So it was my first Sabbath in Kamantian, and so there's these huge mountains, and I walk up to church, and in church, it's so different than the church we're in right now. Everyone has these flip-flops on, and so outside of the church door, there's literally like 70 pairs of flip-flops, and everyone can remember whose flip-flops are whose. It's so impressive. And so I walk in, and it's all bamboo. The entire floor is just bamboo. And so I walk through, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing, and I'm shaking people's hands, and I'm like, okay, manga sabato, because I think that's how you say happy Sabbath. And so everyone I'm shaking hands with is like, oh, they're laughing, oh, yeah, manga sabato. And I'm like, wow, this is great, the people love me, this is awesome. And then one of my missionary friends who understood the language a little bit better, she's like, Brandon, you're just saying Sabbaths, like the pluralized version of Sabbath. So I was walking around saying Sabbaths, Sabbaths, Sabbaths. And everyone's like, oh, wow, this white American, he's hilarious. He's trying to speak our language. Oh, man. And so I'm sitting there, and it's like I had never really experienced culture shock before, so all this is new to me. So I'm sitting there, and anyone who's been on a mission trip, you know that the kids are just awesome. And so, they're jumping on me, wrestling, all this fun stuff. And it was crazy, and so I'm trying to figure out how can I connect with these kids. Okay, I can mess around, tickle these sort of things, and I'm thinking, okay, I've worked at camp for all these years, but all those kids speak English. These kids have no idea. And so I think, what if I tried a magic trick out on these kids, And so do you guys know this thing where you can take your finger off like this? Okay, so check this out. I walk up to this little kid, and he's maybe 6 years old, and I'm like, hey, bro, and we make eye contact, and I go like this. And his face is just like, oh, are you kidding me? And he starts laughing. He brings in all these other kids. And I'm showing them how to do it. And they're like, Anokwan. It means how. And so, and I'm feeling all good. And finally, this older gentleman walks over. He's maybe 60 years old or so. And he walks up to me, and he's a little bit skeptical. He's hearing this guy can take off his finger. I want to see if it's true or not. And so he's like, oh, yeah, I can sort of understand that he wants to see it. And so I'm like, all right, are you ready for this? And I go like this. And he's like, and I pull it off, and he's like, They had never seen that in their entire lives. Oh, man, it was crazy. A lot of those kids, I was a math teacher for the 3rd through 6th graders at a mission school we have. It's on the island of Palawan in the Philippines. We're working in the mountains with a native Filipino group, and it was absolutely awesome. One of my students, his name was Peter. And Peter, one thing that's really interesting is you get totally different age ranges. So Peter, he was 18 years old, but he was in 4th grade. And so Peter, he enjoyed school, but he wasn't that good at math. And so one day I was giving them a test, and people are getting, they're moving on, they're getting through their tests, and Pete there, I can tell that it's taking him a little bit longer. He's having some issues with his test. And so, he's trying to figure out these multiplication problems, and it's a little bit hard for him. Oh, you got this, Pete there, you got this. And other kids are going, and once they get done with the test, they can go to recess. And so he's like, oh man, I want to go to recess. And finally, okay, I'm taking a little bit longer. He's getting frustrated, and I can see on his face. And I'm like, all right, Pete there, you only have 3 more problems left. You can totally do this, dude. And he's getting closer and closer, and by the end of it, he's the last person in our little outdoor classroom, and he gets mad. And he takes his fist, and he slams it on the desk, and he literally just stands up and just runs into the jungle. And I'm just like, what on earth am I going to do? And I'll tell you, the first thought I had was, I'm going to call his parents. Then I remembered, you can barely even get signal in Comantia, and no one really has cell phones. Maybe a few people do, but none do. And I remember getting really upset. And I thought to myself, I was like, okay, I came all the way from America to teach math. I gave up, a year of school. I gave up, playing basketball, all this fun stuff back in America. And I came to serve these kids, and one of them just literally stands up and just runs away from me. And man, I was mad. And so I'm getting upset about it, and then it was almost like the Holy Spirit talked to me, and he's like, Brandon, what did Jesus give up when he came here to earth? And how many times have you just literally stood up and just ran from God because you were angry at him about something? Man, I went through an organization called Adventist Frontier Missions, and one of the sayings at Adventist Frontier Missions is, the difference between a mercenary and a missionary is how we respond to brokenness. So the difference between being a mercenary and being a missionary is how we respond to brokenness. So today we're talking about, okay, go be a missionary. But imagine if every single person in this room went to go be a student missionary, but we didn't learn how to respond to brokenness how Jesus did. That would avail nothing, right? Long story short, Pete there, he actually ended up coming back to school. I got to hang out with him and got to form a stronger bond with him, and we got to be good friends. And it was just the best feeling to see him come back to school. And actually, he's starting to have Bible studies with my career missionary. And so it just really made me happy. One thing that is really hard for me is knowing that my kids are back there. I won't lie, I think about them every single day, my students, and I wonder how they're doing. The school I was at, it's not uncommon for little girls, maybe 12 years old, to get married to these older guys, and then, they can't come to school anymore. So I wonder about these things, and sometimes, to be completely honest, I think, what did I do? I was there for a year, but, I'm gone now, and, this hurts. And I remember on the last day when I was leaving, these kids, they're speaking in their language, and then now I'm getting messed up. Then they're like, oh man, Brandon, we're gonna miss you so much. And then, they start crying, and I start crying, and I'm just like, oh, it totally messes with me. And I came back to reentry, and someone, one of my friends, she also went through AFM, and she made a comment, and she said, sometimes people are worth the scars. And then I think of my own heart and how, man, I miss those kids so much, and how they miss me as well. And, there is a little scar there because we had to, separate for a while. But Jesus thought that we were worth the scars on the cross, right? Mm-hmm. And so just to have a little scar in my own heart for not being there right now, I know it hurts right now, but I know that one day that we're going to see people in heaven because of mission work that we do on this earth. And that's going to make it all worth it, in my opinion. So today, I don't want to come up here and say, everyone needs to go be a student missionary, everyone needs to go do it. But what I do want to say is that I believe that we are called to respond to brokenness as Jesus did. And I believe that once we figure that out, that, oh man, it's going to look amazing. And I believe that we'll each be able to bring heaven to other people through the way that we deal with brokenness. And something that was really interesting for me was I thought that I knew how to respond to brokenness in others, but I had never responded to the brokenness in my own heart first. And so I would be trying to minister to someone, and it would feel like, oh, I'm trying to, help them with their brokenness, but I never realized that I had my own wounds inside of my own heart that I had never invited Jesus into. And so I want to invite you guys. You don't go out to be a student missionary because you want to add something to your spiritual resume or you want to go on a vacation. But the reason you go out as a student missionary is because you felt what it's like to have Jesus come into your heart in those moments where it's like God is just looking right at you and he can see right into the depths of your heart and he knows the sin. But God still says, hey, I still want to be friends with you and my grace is sufficient. If you've had that experience, I would really encourage you to be a student missionary. It's a great way to meet practical needs out there in the world and also to help people get to know Jesus better. Thanks.
Thank you guys for interesting questions. We have a slew of questions to ask our students who have been involved in missions and service. But before we get to that, I want to take the opportunity to allow them to introduce themselves to you and to share where they served. You know Brandon already because he shared that, so we're going to start with our other student missionary. Today I told you we have 2 people who served as student missionaries, and that means they took a semester or an entire year off to go into the mission field and serve. Brandon did that, and he spoke of it. And we also have Hoseas here, who also took a year off and served. So I'm going to ask Hoseas first to tell us your full name, where you served, and what you did there.
Thank you, Chaplain. My name is Hoseas Flores. As Chaplain Price said, I served in Hawaii, big sacrifice there, and I served as a volunteer youth pastor. So I worked with the church, I worked with the youth there. I was teaching baptismal classes, doing Bible studies, working in an academy, and a whole lot of other things on the side as well.
Fantastic. Now, Brandon, I know that you've shared some story already, but I'd like you just once again, for those who might not have been tuned in quite when you put this information out there, where you served, and tell us 1 or 2 things that you did while you were in the mission field that maybe you didn't mention when you were on stage a few minutes ago.
Okay. So I was working with a native Filipino people group on the island of Palawan in the Philippines. And basically what I would do is in the afternoons I would teach, in the mornings I would learn their lengua culture. So that's a mixture of their language and also their culture. And a lot of times it would just be me sitting in their bamboo house and a lot of these awkward moments where they're just, you know, and for us Americans, this is really awkward to really sit down and just look at each other in the eyes. But they're really good at it, and so I did that, and I taught.
We also have the privilege today of having 2 students with us who actually went on mission trips, and this could have been anywhere from a week to 3 weeks out in the mission field. So I'm going to ask Jackie to go first, introduce herself, what she did, and then I'm going to ask Emery to go second and do the same.
Good morning. My name is Jackie Dona. I went to Belize for a week, and we helped build an extension to a chapel that was on an Adventist college, and then we also did some medical work. So,
Jackie, did you have the opportunity to do anything else besides medical work and building? I know there's something else particularly that you did.
I also had the opportunity to preach. So we did an evangelistic series that lasted the entire week. So.
And children's VBS, so there was opportunities for lots of different giftings in that one mission trip. Emery, please tell us about your experience.
So last December, I went to Honduras for the 6th time, I guess, with Pastor Russell here. And this time was special. I worked in the hospital pretty much the whole time and was doing blood draws and whatnot, while the rest of the group was doing flag camp for the community kids. And just playing lots of soccer and eating lots of great food, so.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, students, for sharing your experience. I'm going to put this question that came in from a listener out to all of you. So if you could, tell us one of the best experiences from your missions time. One of your best experiences from your missions time. And I'll ask Jackie to start, and then any of the rest of you can jump in.
I kind of knew that you were going to pick me first. The first one that comes to my mind was the second time that I preached, because I preached 2 of the nights. My friend John preached the other 4. So it was the second time that I preached, and I was incredibly nervous. There was a lot of chaos that was going on behind the scenes. There was a lot of challenges during that time, and I was just feeling really weighed down. I was feeling I was worried, I was anxious, And I kind of felt like maybe this is not where God was leading me. Maybe I came here out of own selfish reasons, or, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to do for the time. And so after a lot of praying and after just kind of sucking it up and getting on stage, after I made an appeal for baptism, I prayed, nobody came up. I prayed, I opened my eyes, and there was one little girl who was standing there. And instantly I realized, God, this was all you. Like from the beginning, when I thought you were calling me here, this was you. And to just see that God would do it for one. Like even if he called me all the way there just to save one person, that it was just worth it. So that's the one thing that stands out in my mind.
Gentlemen, anybody can jump in. One of your best experiences. Emery, I see you flipping your head, so go ahead.
Yeah, every year, we, near the end of the week, we'll go out to the market and we'll buy lots of produce and rice and beans and stuff like that. And what we'll do is we'll partition it out into these different bags. And they're plastic bags. They aren't very environmentally friendly, so they can like hold a ton of stuff. And so what we'll do is we'll go around to like the worst streets there in Santa Barbara and just give each family like a Christmas meal, sort of like a bag full of lots of different ingredients that they can cook a meal with. And just to see the faces, like just like Brandon's surprise of a little thing, that you can show that we, maybe do regularly. Just little simple food items just make someone's day, make someone's week, make someone's month, and just help them beyond, what they can do for themselves. And it's just a huge blessing, so.
Josias.
Well, so it was communion at my church, the church that I was at, and that church, there's a homeless guy that actually attends that church, which I think is great. His name is John. And that Sabbath during communion, you go through the foot washing first, and then you go through, the bread and the grape juice, and God was talking to me, and he was telling me, like, I want you to go up to the homeless man. Now, this guy, like, only wore flip-flops, right? He didn't really, like, wash very often or groom his feet very often, right? So I'm, like, kind of fighting it. I'm like, okay, I don't know, Lord, maybe there's a young person that I could go to, that I could, do this with. But he kept on putting that in my heart and in my mind, and so I was like, you know what, okay, I'll do it. So I asked, hey, John, you want to, may I wash your feet? Is that okay? It's like, he kind of like looks at me weird, and he's like, okay, yeah, sure, if you want. And so then we go, we wash each other's feet, and as we're doing that, he just breaks down. And then he starts talking, and he just opens up to me and starts telling me, like, he doesn't understand what God's purpose for his life is, in the situation that he's at. But as I was going through that, and I was just listening to him and praying with him, it was just my realization of how filthy I am too. I'm sitting here washing his feet, but in reality, how much more, filthy am I? And that God would send his own son to come and wash me at the cost of his own life. And it just kind of hit me. God is just speaking to me through him. And even though he felt like, God was speaking to him through me, I was blessed even more. And I was able to see God in that moment, And it's like, how selfish was I to not even want to do this for him when he has done so much for me? And that's just one of the experiences that really just touched my heart as I was listening to God, and just through so many different people that I would have never talked to if I wouldn't have not gotten out of my comfort zone. And he was able to just talk to me through that.
Brandon, one of your best experiences.
My best experience is sort of a culmination of many experiences, and it was the realization, a lot of, homesickness is a big thing, and, getting malaria, all these crazy things. And it was the realization that, through all this stuff, I didn't know, through trying to learn the language, through looking like a fool, to sometimes messing up cultural, little innuendo, like all this stuff. But it was the realization that through all this stuff, somehow, like, I started to love these people, and they started to love me. And just when that hit me, I was like, man, I really love these people. That I'll never forget that feeling.
Amen. We have someone who would like to know about some of the best foods that you ate when you were in your mission experience. So we're going to limit it to one apiece, and we'll start here with Josias and work our way down. the best food you experienced in your mission experience?
That's tough. Hawaii, they eat a lot of American food, obviously, but they also have a lot of Asian influence. So there's a lot of Asian food. There was something particularly there that I enjoyed. I'm not sure if it's in the States or not. It's called tofu katsu. And it was just the way that they fry this tofu and they make it with a special sauce. It was just amazing. I loved getting that.
So they have, like on Sabbaths or special days, they'll have, for all the kids at the orphanage there, they'll have these things called baleadas, and they're basically like burritos, only they have different ingredients. They put like egg and some random cream stuff that makes it taste amazing, and like, I don't know, random stuff. And so usually they can't have it because it's too expensive, but we brought some funds and fed everyone baleadas for Sabbath.
I can't pick. The food in Belize was amazing. It was like a mixture of Caribbean and Hispanic. Whew, it was amazing. I can't pick. We had everything from rice. They put coconut in everything. It was delicious. Yeah, I can't pick. The food in general was just amazing. And they made it with love. I think that was the best part. Like, the food that they gave us, the main ingredient was love.
Where I was, they don't have that much great foods, and so we'd have potlucks. we'd have potlucks at church, and you'd have like all these people bringing, they call them candidos, or their pots, and so all these people are bringing pots. I'm like, man, this potluck is about to be hype, and literally every single pot just has rice in it, and so we would just eat rice with rice.
Thank you, guys. We have a very astute question, a very thoughtful question here, and I think it gets to the heart of what Brandon really was talking about when we deal with the brokenness in other people and our own brokenness. The question is, how can you know whether you're in the mission field to truly help those in need, or you're just doing it for yourself? How can you know whether you're in the mission field to help those who are in need, or whether you're just doing it for yourself?
I think of the story of Jonah. And I was listening to a professor recently talk about that, and how Jonah was stubborn, and how Jonah didn't want to go out, and how even when he was running away, God was able to use him to reach the sailors, right? Which is a part that we don't talk about. And I think, at least in my own experience, I don't think I was ready. I don't think it was completely selfless, my motives for going out there. Now, God did open up the door, so I knew that's what he wanted for me. But when I got there, and he just kept telling me, just listen to what I'm doing. Just open up your eyes to what I'm doing. He was working a lot in me. And as I was ministering, yes, I was reaching out to other people. He was changing me too. So I think there's always that aspect. You know, when you serve, God is working in you and through you. It's not just through you. I think that's part of the reason why he chose us to minister. As to how to know exactly that you're not being selfish, I think we all know that personally. I mean, I can't point a finger and say, oh yeah, you're a selfish person for going out there. I think that's something that the Holy Spirit puts in our hearts. But even if we are selfish, I think God can work in us and through us, because none of us are completely selfless, I believe.
I think it's important to know that sometimes if you're waiting to be perfect, that's actually the enemy making you immobile. God will use you, and he's waiting for someone to say, okay, God, I'm not perfect, and I don't know, I might be going for me. I might be going because I want to taste all the rice in the pots. But he's looking for hands and feet who will go and surrender, because when you're there, you're going to be bombarded. Any one of these guys could tell you, you're going to be bombarded daily with needs that come to your doorstep. And you might have gone when it was all about you. I think when you come back, you'll find out you learned something different. And not only did God use you to help people, but he helped using people there to help and change you, which leads us into our next question. How do you feel like, as a missionary, you were changed? How do you feel like, as a missionary, you were changed? We'll start with Brandon.
one thing that I noticed, we describe it as when you go to a completely different culture. In America, we're very good at hiding sort of like maybe our faults, our mishaps, things that aren't perfect or that we think aren't perfect. And in the mission field, or in any just a completely different culture, it's sort of like all those little things, they just go like that. And so all of these little things just start to get exposed. And so I think the way that I changed the most was I don't try and hide things from God anymore, because I know that even when stuff gets exposed, that he'll still love me. And I think that was the biggest thing I learned in the mission field.
Emery, how about you?
I think on trips, if you're willing, you can both find yourself and lose yourself. And especially this last trip, it was the 6th time I've gone, but it's like, what does God have in store for me? And it ended up being a major change. And so, you honestly have to be careful because you don't know what's going to happen. But when you truly evaluate priorities in life and say, all right, end time priorities in Jesus' eyes, we're his Father and his people, then what are they for me? Are they the same? And so that was kind of a realization of that, just kind of saying, all right, God, reshape my priorities and do whatever it takes.
Thank you. Another very real question from the audience. What was actually the worst experience, or was it really all just fun in the mission field? And I'm going to ask Jackie to answer that question, if she would. What was the worst experience, or was it really all just fun in the mission field?
It was not all fun at all. I was just looking back at my journal, because I tried to journal while I was there, and the things that I wrote down, just the daily struggles. It was my first time out of the country. It was my first time preaching. So I was completely out of my comfort zone in many different ways. I was in a new place, different culture. And I feel like the entire experience was just so challenging for me. Yes, it was fun. I met a lot of cool people, but I was out of my comfort zone the entire time. So it was really challenging, I would definitely say. But in the end, being out of my comfort zone, as much as I was, it really helped me to learn a lot about myself, to learn a lot about other people, and definitely to learn a lot about God.
Josias, how about for you?
Well, I think for me, one of the hard things was going out and leaving people that I love behind, and just being out there, and sometimes feeling like you're not making a difference. And so you think, I gave up a year of school, my friends are moving on without me, or my family's back there, people I care about are back there. And I'm here, and I don't see how I'm making a difference sometimes. And I think Satan uses that as a temptation to bring you down. But as I was saying before, God used different people to teach me different things, people that I would have never talked to otherwise. And so even though when I was going through those moments, God was showing me, hey, I use unconventional methods to do the things that I want to do. And you don't always see the results now, but I'm using you. I have you here for a reason. So even though it was tough to be in a position where you felt like you're not making a difference sometimes, when you're by yourself, you're alone. God was still there saying, hey, I got you. I don't know.
Amen. 2 more questions. Brandon, this one came specifically for you. And the question is, how do you show Jesus to a people whose language you don't even speak?
There was this one time, and this guy, his finger, he totally smashed it. It was literally coming this way. And so I was like, oh, let me do my missionary duty. I'm going to pray for this guy's finger in his language. And so, I start off the prayer pretty well. I think it's going well. And so there's a difference. So a finger is tullu. Vegetables is tulnu. And so I was like, dear Lord, could you please heal his vegetables? Yeah, so I totally screwed that one up, but he just laughed it off. He thought it was hilarious. But yeah, in a very serious way, I think just really showing that, hey, I care about you, so I'm going to take the time to learn your language, learn your culture. That in and of itself is just showing Jesus, I think.
I said 2 more questions, but a really easy one came in to answer. There was a question about, if I can't go to the mission field, what can I do right here? I want to point your attention to what is called the service menu. The service menu is found on the Campus Ministries webpage, And the service menu has opportunities from all around Southwest Michigan of people within driving distance, sometimes within walking distance, that are needing help. So you don't necessarily have to go to the mission field. If you'll just take the time today, tomorrow, this weekend, go to the service menu. You can find it on the Campus Ministries webpage and look, a plethora of needs, everything from helping kids after school to visiting the elderly in nursing homes, to helping with music programs in Benton Harbor, to helping with Habitat for Humanity and winterization. There's so many needs right here around us. So for our last question, I'd like for you to answer this. Why should I consider going as a missionary? And this we're going to take for long term or short term. Why should I consider going as a missionary?
I think a lot of times people wonder, am I called to be a missionary? And I thought about that as well before I went. But then I realized God has already answered that question. In the Great Commission, He's already told us to go out, and share about Him. And yes, it starts at home. So I think being a missionary first is a mindset, not just a trip. And once you start having that mindset, and once you understand that God's already called you to that, it's not like, I'm going to put a sign out there, yes or no. No, He's already called you to that. You just need to claim that promise now, like, God, just open up the doors, because I know this is what you want. That changes things. That changes your perspective. And yes, you may be here, and you were talking about how to be a missionary here. And I think it's about seeing through His eyes, which is something that I learned. It's about seeing people the way that He sees people, meeting needs the way that Jesus met people's needs, showing sympathy to people as you walk by. That's being a missionary. It's just that when you take a trip, you're doing that to people that are not in your immediate community. And so God's already called us to do that, in our immediate communities and in our outward communities. And I think it's just a matter of you being willing to step out there, because God's already called you to that.
Emery, how would you answer the question?
With a question, by saying, would you like to grow closer to Jesus, and not only be closer to Him, but to also feel His presence, in a very deep and more meaningful way. Because at the end of the Great Commission, after He says go, He says, and lo, I will be with you always. And I think that many times I go through life and I think, God, are you through this with me? Like, are you sticking this out with me? And of course He is, but when I'm truly giving of myself, I need to pull from somewhere. And if He is filling me, then I will pull from Him. And so that was kind of the biggest thing for me.
Jackie?
I would definitely agree with what they said. To add to that, aside from feeling called to go to Belize specifically, one of the reasons that I went was I thought about it. It was my senior year, and I wasn't sure if an opportunity like this was going to present itself again. After you graduate, responsibilities hit even harder. So I just thought about the fact that time and money, they were issues, but after college, it gets even harder. So for me, that's one of the reasons why I went. So I would say it's definitely worth getting through the challenges of time, money, fears, to get the overall experience of actually going on a mission trip. So that's what I would add.
And Brandon?
I know that there's probably someone out in this audience right now who's thinking about going to be a student missionary next year. And I want to tell you that the healing that you've experienced for God is your own specific healing. And God is already putting the idea for you to go be a student missionary in your head, because He has someone in mind in another country or another place who needs to experience the healing that only you have. And no one else can minister to them the way that you're going to minister to them, because you are the only one who's experienced the healing that you've experienced from God, if that makes sense. And so that's why to go be a student missionary, because there's someone out there right now who you could help in such a great way.
The Apostle Paul, who was a missionary, put it something like this: the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we in turn can comfort others. So there was a plethora of questions that had to do with one theme. How do I go? How can I serve? What are the needs? What are the mission trips? So we'd like you to turn your attention to the screen right now. If you are considering going to be a student missionary and a short-term mission trip, this spring break we have a mission trip to an orphanage in Haiti. And in that orphanage, we're going to be not only caring for the kids, we're going to be helping with a construction project to add on to the orphanage, as well as to do some VBS for the kids and run a medical clinic for the orphanage and the community. If you will also see at the bottom, it says apply now in the religion department if you're interested in going on a couple of different mission trips. They have a Honduras trip over spring break, which is the one that Emery's been talking about, and they're going to that community consistently working with this kids camp. You need to apply now in the religion department, or Lebanon over spring break, also apply now in the religion department, or a Honduras evangelism trip during May and June, apply in the religion department. For that Haiti orphanage trip, applications come out next week, 1 week from today, in the campus ministries office. So 1 week from today in the campus ministries office. If you're thinking about going to be a student missionary long term, if you look at the slide that says student missions, I will end the status quo, we would ask you to think seriously about saying, I will take a semester out, I will take a year out, and I will go to some strange place, but I will believe that God has done something in me that he wants me to be able to take and share with someone else. And we ask you to apply now, start the process now. We will actually have a booth set up today on your way to the cafeteria at the bottom of the stairs that can get you started on the process of applying to be a student missionary next year. We'd also ask that you take time to go to a website called hesaidgo.org. Several of you ask, is there a website that I can look and see the needs around the world? Hesaidgo.org. Let's pray, and thank you for considering putting feet to your faith. God, I thank you today for the opportunity to be alive and be in a land of plenty. Help us to really hear the call to go into all the world, to spread the gospel and the good news, to meet the needs, to care for the widows and the orphans. We ask you, Lord, to make us people who are pleasing and useful to your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.